have some quiet? Newcomers. Just kidding. No, we like lots of noise. It's terrific. Wonderful to have you here. This little group will be exploring some powerful ideas. And tomorrow morning they'll be viewed in Saudi Arabia and Japan and everywhere else because this is going on the internet. So sign your releases now, right, David?
Absolutely.
I wanted to introduce Claude Poncelet and Noel Poncelet, and they're going to be presenting. Both are going to be presenting tonight, even though Noel wasn't written up on the description, but we made a little adjustment. Let me just start off and say this. I think this is actually true. That of all of the couples I know, you are the most impressive couple of my entire life. You know, in terms of just the depth of your explanation and the clarity of your vision, it's just awesome. And it all came out of a long journey, exploring all sorts of things. And even now, they're pushing the boundaries of what they've known. It is so inspiring. Really, I wanted you to hear that before I got into some of the details. Claude I wish I could say this with authority, I don't know. How many scientists are also shamans? PhD in physics and also shaman. How many do you know?
I don't know any.
You see, I know people that have written about shamanism, you know, that are also physicists, but not anyone who is a shaman.
I suspect there are some, but they don't let it be known.
Okay, so Claude is the only one foolish enough to let it be known that he is. No, but this is, I think it's so important. It's a deep truth quest. He wanted to know what's the truth of things, and so he plunged into this exploration and ended up with here's the title of his dissertation: Behavior of Neutrons in Four-Dimensional Space-Time in Complex Geometries. And so that is like one deep plunge into reality, right? And then for most people that would be enough, not for Claude. So then he goes off into this deep study of shamanism. And Noel and Claude have been presenting workshops on shamanism all around the planet: Russia, Ukraine, the United States, Europe. But there's a third element in Claude's past, and that is the corporate world. So he's worked for many years with PG&E, attempting to protect the environment. And these three worlds, the scientific, the shamanic, and the corporate, are all brought together in their work. And that's why I think what you have to say is of such importance for all of us, because it's a way of living into this insight. Noel is a social worker who became a clinical psychotherapist. In particular, she's a hypnotherapist, and focuses in her private practice on such themes as addiction or creativity. And her exploration is involved with meeting and activating an inner guidance to bring us forward in our work in the world. So I think we have the opportunity to hear from two really absolutely remarkable people. And we were just talking about this, and both of them agree that our way forward as a species has to include something like a shamanic orientation in the world, that in whatever form, that will enable us to really become a different kind of human presence. So please join me in welcoming Claude and Noel Poncelet.
Thank you, Brian. It's a real pleasure to be here with everyone. Let me start by asking how many of you either are practice shamanism or are well familiar with it.
Well, if you consider acupuncture shamanism.
Okay, good. Always nice to know. Now, as a former university professor, it's really a delight for me to speak again to graduate students. That's always been a favorite activity of me, of course other students of life there. Because of that, let me start by sharing an experience I had as a graduate student, myself working on the doctoral thesis that Brian just mentioned, which was something like about 52 years ago now. Now, I was living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at that point with Noel, and we had 2 small children. And my research was a very theoretical one. I said it was 4-dimensional space-time equations, behaviors of neutrons, and other elementary particles in very complex geometries. And as I was getting deeper and deeper into the theoretical development, I happened to have a visitor come in during the night. And this happened quite a few times. The visitor would come into our bedroom when we were sleeping, and I can remember him very vividly. He's about late 20s, early 30s, and he would come in, and there was our bed, and there was a dresser at the end of the bed, and he would stand against the dresser with his right elbow on the dresser. And I would sit up and we would talk. And and this happened quite a few times. Now, after a while, Noelle would wake up. She would feel a presence, or she would hear my voice, and she would stand up and whatnot, and I would come out of whatever trance I was, and the visitor would vanish. One time, Noelle must have woken up pretty soon after the visitor came in, because she remembered exactly what I said. And she said that I was sitting up, and I said, "Hey, what's up?" And she remembered me saying that. Now, I knew the conversations we had, me and the visitor, were about my research. I just knew that. In the morning, however, I could not remember anything that we had said. I just knew that this was about. Now, this was not frightening. It was, however, so vivid, and it kept repeating, that I could not deny it or just forget it or put it aside. I did not share all this with my thesis advisor, however. I kept it for myself. I didn't understand what it was, but so it was. Now, several months later, after I had successfully defended my thesis and obtained my PhD, I was working in a research lab, and I was back then very fascinated by Soviet physics. The Soviets had an approach to quantum mechanics, quantum physics, and elementary particle physics, which was very different from European or United States physics. And so I was very fascinated by their approach. So every lunch hour I would go to the library and pore over a translation of Soviet physics journal and read those, and I was quite excited by all that. And one day I come across an article that just floors me. Now, in my thesis, I had an appendix where I decided that I would take a very simple geometry, the simplest geometry I could figure out, which was a uniform homogeneous sphere. And then I could solve my equation analytically. Otherwise, I would need computers to solve my equations. And back then, by the way, the computer I used, which was an IBM 707, which was a little fraction of the speed of my laptop computer could occupy the whole warehouse. And so I had been able to solve these equations for that simple geometry. And as you know, some PhD students are wont to do, I had introduced new variables, and I defined those, given them name, symbols, usually capital letters, and superscript and subscripts using Greek letters and whatnot. And I have about a dozen of those. Well, this article in a Soviet journal is reproducing my equations and the solutions exactly like mine, with all the same definitions, using the same symbols, the same superscript, the same subscripts, as in my thesis. Now, I was just stumped. So the first thing I'll say, well, when did the Soviet article get published in a Soviet journal? This was a translation. So I look at the date, and there was no way the author could have had access to my thesis. Back then, the thesis, the high tech was you put the thesis in a microfiche form, you know, and it had not yet been put in microfiche form. No, he would not have been able to access anything about my thesis. And so, you know, I asked myself, you know, did this man somehow get into another dimension and travel and came to visit, and we worked on the thesis, on the research together? Or was there a messenger between, the visitor was a messenger between him and me? No, I didn't know, but, you know, I just, you know, said that, you know, that's part of reality. This was, by the way, not my first such unusual experience. You know, all throughout my life, and I'm sure that most, if not all of you, have had those experiences. I've had experiences in nature, but also in daily life, which were quite not ordinary. They were almost magical, they were unexplainable, but things happened. And I had always, since childhood, sensed that there was something else to reality than just what my senses had access to. As a scientist, you know, while I could not explain any of these experiences, including what happened while I was writing my thesis, I could not reject them or deny them without, for me, violating the fundamental basis of science. That is, the scientific method develops, as you know, models and theories of reality. These are models, usually mathematical models. And the validity and acceptance of any of those models is fully predicated on its agreement with our experience of the world. The world tells us what it is. We do not define what the world is like. And here I had those experiences which were repeated, they were clear, I couldn't describe them using accepted scientific models, but I could not reject them either. And so I just felt that they're just part of my reality. Now it took about 20 years until the early 1980s when I was introduced to shamanism. And that introduction gave me a framework with which I could start explaining all these strange experiences I've had throughout my life. It confirmed my lifelong intuition that there is another reality, which is as real as the ordinary physical reality. And it also provided me with techniques, which is what the shamanic practice does, that allowed me to access that reality at any time, anywhere, using my intention, and not waiting for spontaneous occurrences with what had happened before. Now, for those of you not familiar with the shamanic traditions, shamanism in its many and varied cultural forms focuses on our connection on our interaction with this other reality. And I call this other reality the spiritual dimension of reality. Sometimes it's called in shamanic circles non-ordinary reality. Now, in entering non-ordinary reality, usually in an altered state of consciousness, which is often facilitated by regular rhythmic drumming, the shamanic practitioners enters in contact and interacts with and learns from what I call spirits. Now, the term spirit in our modern culture can sometimes evoke prejudices and sometimes unease, fear. All the term spirit denotes, it's the manifestation of the spiritual dimension of reality. And when we access that dimension, the access is through what we would call spirit. And those spirits can be the manifestation of the spiritual dimension of beings around us, like being in natures or others, or for entities that have not incarnated. Now, the term shamanic journey, which I will use in my talk tonight, is just a metaphorical description of such entrance into non-ordinary reality and our contact with spirits in that reality. Now, this non-ordinary reality, for me, together with ordinary reality, form what I call a bigger reality with a capital R, in which we live our lives as human beings on this planet. Now, this capital R reality has physical dimensions, time, space, matter, energy, which we access through our senses, oftentimes enhanced by our modern technologies. And this is what science studies. Reality has also a spiritual dimension, which is the realm of spiritual traditions. And I am convinced we all have the innate capacity, all of us, to access this spiritual dimension. And this is what I call the shaman within, name of a book I wrote. Now, later in the talk, I will relate, for those of you interested in consciousness, various levels of consciousness to our perception of this bigger reality with a capital R. So everything that is part of our world, everything that has a form, has a spiritual dimension. Now, this is true not only for the so-called living beings, quote unquote, such as plants and animals. It's also true for other forms of nature, such as rocks, mountains, rivers, lakes, the ocean. It applies to things like the microbiome, this complex mix of bacteria, fungi, viruses that inhabit our bodies. But it's also true, and this is an important point, for the forms that we, human beings, being part of nature, create out of the elements of the earth. That's what the earth does. It creates rocks, it creates trees. We are part of nature. We create buildings, we create computers, we create cell phones, we create cars, we create institutions. All these also have a spiritual dimension. So, since everything has a spiritual dimension, everything in the world is sacred. And if we know this and live by this, our lives can change radically. Now, living the sacred in everything is to reconsecrate the world, which for me is perhaps the most important task of the human species on this planet. Now, while enlightened policies, laws and regulations, and I've been very much involved in those. Education, new ways of living based on community and cooperation are all necessary to meet the ecological, social justice and human challenges we face today. I'm convinced that it is not enough, and it will never be enough. To truly access these crises, I am convinced that we need again to see the sacred in everything. The sacred in a tree, the sacred in a mountain, the sacred in the other, the sacred in the technology. If we see the sacred in technology, that use of the technology is going to be fundamentally different than our usual mindless use of technologies. Now let me share a personal story of living the sacred in our technological world, which always is kind of surprising for people, and how this can radically change the way we experience our daily lives. In January of 2014, almost 2 years ago now, I was diagnosed with advanced stage 4 lung cancer, metastasized to the brain and several vertebrae in my spine. Well, that was a huge shock, even though I am not a smoker and there's no history of cancer in my family. Now, my shamanic practice has been a huge support and blessing in my relationship with cancer. Now, the story I want to tell is that in February of 2014, the following month, I had a radiation treatment for my brain tumors. There were 26 of them. And this is an advanced, here at UCSF, medical technology and procedure called Gamma Knife, strange name, which uses high energy gamma radiation, which is focused specifically on the tumors and hence has no impacts on healthy neurons. As a physicist, of course, I was quite intrigued by the technology. Now, the procedure took nearly 5 hours, as I had to lay immobile for 90 minutes at a time under the radiation dome. Now, in preparation for this treatment, I had done several shamanic journeys to various spirits. I had contacted the spirit of the hospital, the spirit of the radiation dome, the spirit of the gamma radiation, and others, to honor them, bless them, and I would ask, which I usually do, for the most appropriate outcome of the procedure in accordance with the greater harmony of the whole, now and into the future. But when the procedure started, I again journeyed to the spirit of gamma radiation. And while spirits show themselves in certain forms, they don't have a form, but that's usually part of the message. And while in earlier journeys I could not clearly distinguish the form of the spirit of the gamma radiation, this time the spirit showed itself, as I lay down there, clearly as an elder woman. And I asked for guidance as I was about to undergo the procedure. Now, the spirit reminded me that right after the Big Bang, at the birth of our universe, as you know, the first manifestation of matter or energy was in the form of high energy electromagnetic radiation, that is gamma rays. And some of these gamma rays, as described by Einstein's equation E = mc squared, were transformed into matter and antimatter, with the matter, quarks and electrons, becoming the building blocks of atoms, molecules, stars, planets, and our own bodies. And the spirit of gamma radiation told me, quote, "You are being healed by your cosmic ancestors." Now, we all came down from those primordial gamma rays. Every particle in us comes ultimately from those gamma rays. Now, hearing this brought a fundamental change to the medical procedure I was undertaking. I was no longer being bombarded by radiation with all the scary aspect of that. My cosmic ancestors were healing me. And this was a sacred treatment. And the 5 hours I was there outside in the dome were filled for me with wonder, with joy, with gratitude. I could have stayed there much longer. And I know that the same can happen to every one of our experience in the daily life as we deal with this technological modern world. Now, perhaps not obvious, and yet maybe most important, is how can we reconsecrate the world in our professional lives, whether we work in commercial or financial sectors, corporate sectors, the non-profit sector, medical and artistic sectors, and yes, even the higher education sector. Now, as Brian mentioned, part of my professional career, I worked for a large corporation, PG&E here, on protection of the environment. And for many years, spirits taught me ways to consecrate my professional work. These practices, which I carried out during my everyday work, needed by necessity to be short and low-key. I could not use the traditional shamanic works of indigenous people. So they needed to be short, low-key, so that I could practice them, carry them out throughout the day, while I was meeting with people, in meetings with people, at my desk, in conversations with others. I describe and give instructions for these practices, by the way, in a chapter on my book on shamanism in professional life. Now, one such practice, which I called word doctoring, has for the purpose, a practice I learned from spirits, has for the purpose, as its purpose to help bring about harmony in a situation or an event, again, in accordance with the greatest well-being of the whole. Now, the practice, which takes only 30 seconds or less, because that's all the time you usually have when you're in a meeting, consists in quickly acknowledging the 4 elements, quickly acknowledging the 4 directions, and then asking Spirit for a sacred word, which would usually come very quickly to me. And I would then insert that word in whatever I would be saying. Now, the sacred word would then offer, the word offer is important, the possibility of more harmony to anyone hearing it. That's a power word, it's a sacred word. It's an offer. And this, by the way, is a matter of ethics. Now, I cannot manipulate or impose anything on anyone without their permission. That's not ethical. But I can make an offer. I can provide an opportunity for anyone wanting to use that opportunity. I like the practice, by the way, which I still use regularly, because it reminded me of sacred words or sacred sounds used by my European Celtic shamanic ancestors, which they use for healing and divination for those of you who have Celtic ancestry. Now, usually the word has nothing to do with the situation at hand, which makes it always a bit difficult and fun to insert in a sentence without anyone noticing something strange. Now, in the 1990s, I served as Chief Staff Liaison on President Clinton's presidential commission called the Presidential Council on Sustainable Development, whose objective was to develop a blueprint for a sustainable America, integrating economic, environmental, and social equity concerns. We met formally every 3 months, usually in Washington, D.C., for 2 or 3 days. Now, there were 10 corporate CEOs in the commission, 10 leaders of environmental and social justice groups, and 5 cabinet secretaries. And the council was chaired by then Vice President Al Gore. Now, I used the word doctoring practice during one of these meetings, and I'd like to read you my account of it to show you that even in those situations it is possible to So we had been meeting for about 2 years, and an issue that appeared intractable was threatening to break the group apart and unravel its hard-won consensus work. The issue was the traditional one of growth versus no growth. Environmental and community leaders, as well as some of the cabinet secretaries, argued that continued growth in the rate of resource use and in the economy made it impossible to reach a sustainable society. The corporate leaders and the rest of the cabinet secretaries argued that continued growth was essential if we wanted to provide economic well-being for everyone, eliminate poverty, and have the financial resources to protect the environment. The classic arguments. Now, a critical 2-day meeting took place in an ornate conference room in the Department of Commerce building in Washington. The future of the council appeared to be at stake. Now, I used everything in my bag of practices to implore spirits for help. I worked with the spirit of the room, of the building, of the Department of Commerce, the spirit of the White House, the spirit of the council, the spirit of Washington City, and others. Now, during the meeting's first session, I used my word doctoring practice to help bring harmony to the situation. Now, I did not take sides, and this is very important when you do this kind of work. That is, growth or no growth, in making my plea to spirits. I only ask for harmony and the most appropriate outcome. Now, the word I received was rainbow. Not an easy word to introduce among such an august group. I remember saying something like, quote, sometimes I have the feeling that sustainability is like looking for the treasure at the end of the rainbow, which led to some approving laughter. But by the end of the meeting, a breakthrough, as surprising as it was welcome, saved the day and the future of the council. The group realized and agreed that the growth no growth debate was a false one and an ill-defined one, that to reach a sustainable and just society, some things must grow while others must not. For example, it is important that pollution, toxic contamination, poverty, natural resource depletion do not grow. And it is important that quality of life, environmental health, open space, savings, and why not profits grow. Once this resolution was reached, the Council was able to productively concentrate on developing policy recommendations that would lead to these outcomes simultaneously. Now, whether this shift was linked to the practice, and that's something I've learned, is really irrelevant. The point was for me to do the practice. That was my responsibility. And of course, all the credit go to spirits. Now, I was made to understand that it's possible that some of you are doing graduate work in various aspects of mental health and social work. And so I've asked Noelle, and she of course agreed with herself, as you know, as a psychologist and psychotherapist, to briefly share her own story in her own profession.
Thank you. How many of you have an interest in psychotherapy? All right. So I have 5 minutes. Okay. So I like that. I'm going to go to the core of it. So the form of shamanic healings that can occur in psychotherapy, and most of the time do, but they may not be really acknowledged as such, include inner guides, inner advisors that we can access via hypnosis, via active imagination, via a shamanic journey. Psychopomp, which is this hypnotic, shamanic way of helping people who have died but have not moved on into the light, whatever that means, to be able to be contacted and helped through. And the reason it shows up in psychotherapy, I'll give you an example, is a client of mine about to reach age 70, and her mother, her aunt, and her sister had died of suicide before the age of 70. And they were all saying, it's useless to turn 70, you're never going to be as beautiful as you are now, it's going to be declined from now on, just come and join us. And my client was suicidal. So utilizing this shamanic practice to connect with these relatives and with permission invite them to know of another reality where they can be more at ease with each other, with themselves, and with their relatives still on the planet makes a big difference. And it did indeed. She died at age 86. Okay, so that's a quick one. Soul retrieval is the way that we really experience a loss, an internal loss of some sort, that shamanically we can, with an experienced shamanic practitioner, recover as an energy that can be reintegrated. Extractions when there are physical illness and intrusion of energies, presences that interfere with the natural way that the body wants to heal. The other one is dismemberment, which is where, and that happens very spontaneously sometimes when you're working with a client, when they will refer to dreams that have been terrifying that occur to them because they don't have a context to understand them. This is where shamanism is so helpful, where they have experiences of being really torn to pieces apart and then put back together. But in the terror of what happens, the coming back together is not always complete and welcomed and partnered with. So we can help there. I'd like to speak a little bit about how many more minutes do I have? Inner guides, because that's really where it's been so interesting. And that's the invitation to a client who is at the end of the rope with a passion to get better and a clear understanding. They don't know how to do it on their own. It's an invitation for them to go into this world Claude has described of non-ordinary reality and connect with a presence who is there for their benefit to help them access resources that can help them toward healing. This is very helpful with people suffering from addiction because, as we all know, that's a place where things get really, really stuck, and life and death is an issue. So what is so interesting is that when the time is right, you can, with 3 sentences, invite somebody to just connect. And I'll just give you an example of a sentence to show you how simple it is and incredibly effective. This is with a client who has sexual addiction, cocaine, alcohol, marijuana, and is a mess, right? By his own definition. And I love him, I have to say, and he has given me permission to say this. So I said something that is like, you said, so I just say, you said that in your life you want to experience a passion and a vitality that has integrity. So I'm inviting you now to follow your longing, follow your passion, that felt passion that you have in your body, to meet a powerful, wise, helpful guide who can help you achieve this. A path may unfold in front of yourself. It may go up to the sky, or it may go into an opening into the earth, or this, it may be a path that's going to be in front of you that you are taking in, and this helping presence is waiting for you and energetically calling you in the form of someone like a teacher, or something like a power animal, a tree, a mountain, a manifestation of nature. Okay? I don't know which is calling you. Just simply close your eyes or keep them open and start walking. That can't be more simple than this. And my client just starts walking. I have said, if you get into a difficult place and you need help, open your eyes, I'll be here. Okay? If not, just do what you need to do. So he closes his eyes, and I'm just waiting silently with my energetic presence being in both worlds. Okay? And asking my own power animals and teachers to be of help, whatever that means. Mostly to calm myself down because I think I'm nuts. Okay? And so my client starts whatever. A minute and a half later, he trembles and he has tears in his eyes. All I do is say, you're doing fine, stay with that. I'm here if you need it. Another minute and a half, and he opens his eyes. That's awfully fast. And I say, are you okay? He says, yes. Would you like to talk about it? Yes. So he describes walking on this path, going up, upper world for those of you who know cosmology or shamanic cosmology. And he meets, by a body of water, a manatee. You know, manatee is that sea cow. It's a marine mammal that's very big and large, and that you can find at the bottom of Florida. And he meets this mammal who simply just says, come in and cuddle with me. Now, my client is big, I have to say, so it's a big animal for a big person. But the connection starts that way. And so I simply say, this is awesome. I'm so thankful you've had this contact. Why don't you go back, if you want to, connect with the manatee again, ask for his name and how you can connect with it more. So close his eyes, goes right back, gets the name of the manatee, and is told how to connect. And what he does is actually use a radio station, turn it on, and during the length of a song that he likes on that radio, he just goes and meets same pattern, this power animal. The beauty about the power animal is that several things happen. First, the power animal starts reparenting him, gets him into water. There is water and there is blood, so he's just being born, and he's cuddled, and he can nurse, he can whatever. Okay. And my client is open to that, so that you know that there is a resonance between the inner advisor and the client for what is possible. There's nothing shocking. The manatee never said a judgmental word for the 6-7 years I followed him. Not once. At times, my client would stop going and feel very guilty and get back to him and then say, and he would say, no problem, let's play. That was the answer, you know. The experience for my client then is really one of being empathized with, received as he is, and then developing those capacities inside of himself. Very body-based, dancing, playing, wrestling, and the result is that over not too many months, my clients started becoming, have self-efficacy, be self-reliant, and his 12-step program started taking hold. Okay, so over the times, he always just would ride on, and my job was to be the co-therapist to the inner advisor. I'm the midwife. So my client is birthing himself, right? And my job is to align myself with the this power animal, who is the inner advisor. And when there is an issue, not to come up with suggestions, but to offer to my client to go back and check and ask what his power animal has to offer as possibilities. So I never went myself to this power animal for consultation. But what I did in front of my client at one point where he was about to relapse is to say, I need for you to connect with your power animal because I don't know how to help you, and I'm scared for you. And so if you would be willing to go and get some advice, I really would appreciate it because I'd like advice for me. And what I wanted to do inside, but I didn't want to give it, is to say, you need to work in the earth. You need to just work with plants, but get grounded, really touch in the next week the earth a lot, okay? So my client closes his eyes, connect with his manate, and comes back. And he looks at me and he says, my power animal, he's saying that whatever you want to say to me, you really ought to say it. That's really interesting. So I tell him, I'm worried about you and I really need for you to just really work with earth. So the next week he comes back, he's weeded his garden, he's put more plants, and his vitality in his body is back. You know, so that's pretty. That's enough? Good. Good. Just say yes. When you do have a place where you know that there is something energetically very healthy that's happening, and that it has harmony and it has hope and it's in the divine realm, then I use the butterfly hug. Do you know the butterfly hug? Okay, it goes like this. So when you are having an experience where you feel really great being a human being, like now, for some of us, okay, then you use the butterfly hug because it bilaterally tells all of your nervous system from head to toe that something really special is going on. So that with my client, when there is such a connection with a power animal or a teacher, we use this. So that's mine. Oh yeah.
Do you have any openings in your practice?
At times.
I'll leave time for questions. Let me talk a bit about science and shamanism. And it could be said that science is the pervasive story of our time, of our modern world. We live in a rational world, surrounded, defined by the complex technologies that derive from science. And yet, as we know, stirring within our modern culture is a yearning for meaning, a yearning for something deeper. That yearning, unfortunately, finds itself an outlet for itself in many dysfunctional ways, as we know, such as addiction to drugs and other escapes. As a culture, we have lost the spiritual story. And if I call for a return to the sacred in life, in everything, I do not see this as requiring that we abandon the science story. As a physicist and a shamanic practitioner, I see no inconsistency between science and shamanism, between scientific knowledge and shamanic knowledge. Now, earlier I mentioned that we live in a bigger reality with a capital R. Science looks at that bigger reality through one window and studies the physical dimensions of reality. Shamanism looks at that bigger reality through another window and studies the spiritual dimension of reality. Both are looking at the same reality, although through different windows. It is not inconsistent at all for science to be open to the possibility of a dimension or aspect of reality that is not accessible to traditional scientific methods, yet is still part and parcel of the reality that science studies. There is nothing in the basis of science that says that this is not consistent. Thus, I've been intrigued for many years by what I call the reciprocity and synchronicity between scientific and shamanic knowledge. Now, I'm not saying that science can explain non-ordinary reality or shamanic experiences, or that shamanic knowledge can explain ordinary reality phenomena. What I'm saying, since they are both looking at the same reality, is that there are metaphors, idea connections between one reality and the other, which can lead to insights and deeper understanding in both. Now, one such metaphor from physics, which I like to share, has been useful for me to better understand the relationship between consciousness and our perception of that bigger reality. Now, in physics, and this is the metaphor, it is understood, as many of you may know, that four fundamental forces in the universe together comprise all of the known forces. Now, the four forces are gravity, electromagnetism, the weak nuclear force, which is responsible for radioactivity, and the strong nuclear force, which is the one that holds the elementary particles of the atomic nucleus together. Now, the four forces are thought to be manifestation of a single unified force and are undifferentiated from one another at extremely high energies and temperatures, such as used during the very short time at the birth of the universe following the Big Bang, and also very likely, for example, at the center of a black hole. Now, as we know, as the energy and temperature decrease, as happened when the cosmos expanded following the Big Bang, the unified force goes progressively through what we could call phase changes, like steam turning into water and ice. And the four forces are progressively perceived as differentiated, separate forces. In a similar way, using the metaphor, at a high level of consciousness, that is high energy, if you wish, what we could call maybe pure consciousness, there is only one reality with a big R that is perceived. But at a low level of consciousness, a low level of energy, reality has gone through a phase change and is perceived as split into two realities, ordinary reality and non-ordinary reality. By awakening to pure consciousness, which spiritual disciplines can help us do. The shamanic practice of shapeshifting is a very effective way to do this. Can help us perceive and experience just that one reality with a big R. Now, most people in the modern world know only ordinary reality. And although many have spontaneous experiences of non-ordinary reality, they often do not understand these experiences or ignore them or fear them. Now, as we learn, for example, the shamanic practice, we learn to perceive non-ordinary reality. Yet, usually, this is separate from ordinary reality. Now, we spend time doing the shamanic journey in a ritual, we see non-ordinary reality, and the rest of the time we ordinary reality, we see this is both. The next step in this spiritual path is to perceive just the one reality. And for me, this is what I mean by reconsecrating the world we live in, where we only see one reality and not just either the physical dimension or the spiritual dimension, but just they're one and the same. They are not separate at a high level of consciousness. Let me say just a few more words. I know that some of you are fortunate to work with Brian in cosmology, and as a physicist, I've always had an ongoing passion for astronomy, cosmology, astrophysics. Now there is, as I said, a spiritual dimension to everything in the world, and of course this includes all the entities that fill our beautiful cosmos. And it is important that we see and acknowledge the sacred in this multitude of entities in the cosmos, whether they're quasars or pulsars, supernovae, black holes, and whatnot. They all have a dimension, a spiritual dimension. They all have a sacred. There are multiple reasons why I believe it is so important to do this and to consecrate, if you wish, the cosmos. First, it can deepen our spiritual path, expanding our consciousness of interconnectedness of everything, our consciousness of the One, with a capital O. Now, spirits of the cosmos, as I have experienced, spirits of quasars, pulsars, supernovae, and their own characteristic wisdom and power that I found very different from that of spirits of nature, for example. And we can learn from them, seek their help. Just as when we communicate with spirits of nature on Earth, we can become more comfortable with our planet and know that we're an integral part of this planet. Communicating with the spirits of the cosmos helps us to be more at ease with the immensity and strangeness of the cosmos and know that we are part of it as well. Finally, and maybe most importantly, consecrating the cosmos can help us to not objectify the cosmos and conquer and exploit space the way we have conquered and exploited Earth. Now, many years ago, I was led by spirits to undertake a number of shamanic journeys to spirits of entities of the cosmos. And these journeys for me have been a source of joy, wonderment, learning. And I describe a number of those in the book. Examples include journeys to quasars and pulsars, which I have found very helpful in seeking healing for our little planet Earth. Journeys to our mother galaxy and other galaxies, such as Andromeda, which I have found very useful in learning about relationships, for example. Journeys to supernovae, which are quite extraordinary, particularly if you merge, those of you who are becoming the supernovae and going through the process of the supernova. where I've learned much about death and rebirth, interconnectedness, and the nature of violence. And also journeys into black holes, in particular the black hole in Sagittarius at the center of our own galaxy, where I have learned much about my pure essence and who I really am. Now these journeys, by the way, are not only deep journeys in space, they are also journeys back in time, since the entities that we journey to are as we see them today through our telescopes, or the light we capture has traveled for many millions or billions of years before it reaches our eyes. I really invite you to journey deep into the cosmos, to consecrate the cosmos, for those of you who are interested in that. It's a wonderful opportunity for me to combine the marvelous and beautiful achievements of modern science, particularly in cosmology, with the power, beauty, and insights of the shamanic journey. And I think it can help us better understand what is our place in this cosmos. Thank you. I would love to hear some questions or comments or answers. Yes.
Like a question on, first of all, thank you so much. It's been really opened my eyes to a lot of different facets to explore and be curious about and discover, and that both of you offered. So I'm so grateful that you've come today. It's such a gift and honor. And a question for both of you, or whoever feels called to answer, has to do with in utilizing these techniques and practices, how does one cultivate the discernment and self-awareness about when one is projecting, onto whatever entity one is, with good intentions, wishing to connect with and learn from, and the degree to which our own material and life experiences sort of might come out and form spectacles in front of us with which we're looking at that, and just anything you'd like to offer about that?
No, it's a good question, and maybe we can both answer a bit. That, is something I've had to deal with all my life, and I've been practicing for shamanism for 35 years or something like that. And it is still something I have to pay attention to. Certainly our ego and other parts of ourselves, the mind, can readily project things. And so, one just has to be very careful and practice over and over again. My scientific training there has been very helpful for me in doing this, because I learned early in my scientific training the value of skepticism. And so I'm always very skeptic when I do any shamanic work, and of course, you need to, it's a balance. You need to, you shouldn't go to the point where you reject everything, you're doing shamanically. But the skepticism is very important. And the only answer I can give you in terms of how to do that takes a lot of practice, a lot of humility, a lot of skepticism. And what I've learned, and I think with students I've worked with when I teach shamanic workshops, is that there's a part of Nu, including the body, that knows whether we're projecting or whether this is real communication with spirits. And we tend to ignore that part, but if we're really honest with ourselves, we know. And I know that my body, for example, if I pay attention to it, it knows. The body doesn't lie. And and the mind, you have to kind of train the mind to, not be the one in control, but be the one who serves my higher spirit. The mind is very important, has an important role, but and ultimately you learn and you know whether it's a projection or not. Do you want to add?
Just want to add that for me, there is a felt experience, the heart is involved, and there's always an element of surprise. Like, I did not know I was going to hear this internally or have this thought coming up. It just has that experience of coming out of nowhere. And so I'm at ease having a journey and dropping 85% of it, because there's just one kernel. And that place I knew was aligned with my soul, my intention, and I will stay with that. Claude will say, journey back to many of his teachers, inner teachers, to just check something that has come up. You know, so indeed the practice teaches us what is really connected and core and what is not. And the really important part at my stage is to really love the one who pretends and hijacks the process and comes up with projection, instead of what I did for many years, is put myself down, devalue myself for doing it. That feeds that process that wants to be recognized. I think our mental mind is meant to want to be the boss, and we need to just say, well, yes, sweetheart, and invite it to just become at service of, but with a real sense of loving that effort that is made by that energy. And then the clarity of the inner connection gets easier, because there is less of that inner struggle inside.
It's a good question. Yeah. Yes.
So this is somewhat of a personal question, so if you don't feel comfortable answering, that's fine.
Sure.
But I'm curious to know what you've experienced with your relationship to your cancer through the shamanic practice, and how, I mean, I found your story about the gamma radiation really powerful and interesting, and I'm curious to know where else that has brought you over the last year.
Yeah, I could spend a whole lecture on that. I actually wrote an article that's going to be out in the journal called Contemporary Shamanism. Called my journey, for those of you, that's the Society of Shamanic Practitioners. Those of you, that's going to be out in a couple of months. But you know, I've journeyed to many spirits from the very start, including the spirit of cancer, for example. And you know, one of the things I learned from the very start is that my cells that are cancerous, my tumors, are my own cells. And so I was taught from the very start a ritual by my spirits where I express love to all my cancer and my cancer cells every day. I express gratitude for what they've done. They've helped me breathe all my life. They're ill, and so I want to take care of them. So I express a lot of love and gratitude to them. I do not want, which is what my culture and many well-meaning friends urge me to do, which is to fight the cancer. You'll win the war. It's you know, you're strong. You know, there's enough wars and fights in the world. I don't want to add any more of that energy. You know, so that's been very, very helpful for me to have that approach. As I said, I also you know, see all you know, I've learned that there is no separation. Spiritual tradition teaches that in the shamanic practice. So I've wanted no separation between my Western medicine treatments and all the so-called alternative complementary treatments I do, and I do a lot of that also. And so everything, I share everything I do, which is non-Western medicine, with all my physicians. Everything is shared, and all their data goes to all my, I want them to cooperate, and it's happening, okay? And, I take, I've been fortunate with this bad diagnosis that I have a mutation that is fairly rare. It only occurs with non-smokers. And there is a chemo, which is a little pill I take, so I don't have to go to the hospital. I take this little pill every morning. From the start, I've worked with the spirit of this chemo. The chemo is made of earth elements. It's on the earth. We've just, mixed them up, but it's earth stuff. And so I work with that spirit. I do a ritual every morning when I take it. And so it's been very helpful in that sense. And I've also, share that quickly, but after I had the diagnosis, it was a shock, of course, totally unexpected. I had shortness of breath and coughing, but everybody, including all the physicians, thought this was asthma because I grew up during the war, in World War II. So, a lot of bombings, a lot of dust, and so I got asthma, all my life, and they thought this was just a bad episode of asthma. What is the point I was going to make?
Lost it.
Yeah.
It'll come back.
It will come back. The very first, after this shock, I did a journey to my power animals and said, can you tell me what is this all about, in other words? And so my power animals took me in this journey, actually what's called the middle world in the cosmology of shamanic, which is the non-ordinary aspect of this world. They took me out in space. And very quickly, we went past the moon to the point where we stopped and looked back, and the Earth was about the size of a ball like this. It was very small, so much further out than the moon astronauts saw it. It was just a small ball. And we stopped there, and they asked me to look at it, and they told me, the Earth, your planet, is ill. The rainforests are ill. There's a lot of contamination, there's a lot of illness there. And I said, your body is ill, and your body is the earth, which it is. And so, I understood immediately from there that mine was not an isolated situation. My body is part of the earth, this is something much bigger. And so when I do a ritual every morning with my chemo, I always pray for the health of the earth, because it's the same thing. In other words, I want my healing to also help the healing of the earth. So, all that is very, very helpful for me. And
Thank you.
to me, quite normal. It's not, I couldn't see any other way of doing it.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I'm curious if you would agree that if you come to your ritual with pure intention and openness and invitation, does the connection with spirit necessarily have to be a spirit animal or these certain things that you have brought up, but can it also be other archetypal forms, like things that you would think that are maybe Jesus or Bodhisattva, or can they be other traditional things but still have that same guidance if you have that intention?
Absolutely. And again, spirits in the spiritual dimension have no form. Okay? They show themselves the way I understand, energetically in a certain form to us, so that at least our mind and whatnot can make sense of that. And yes, they can show, and I've had, spirits show themselves in various forms to me, and sometimes change the form as they converse with me, which is, and yes, you know, and it, you know, it could be the Virgin Mary, or it could be the Buddha, or it could be, you know, and it is possible also to connect with spirits of deceased people, those who are willing to connect. And I have, you know, having Celtic ancestry in Europe, I've been very interested with the shamanic traditions of my ancestors, you know, 2,500 years ago, before it was squashed by the Romans and the Christian invasions. And so I've worked with spirits of ancient Celtic shamans from my own region where I was born, you know, and I've learned a great deal from them. So it can, yeah, it could be and a spirit can show itself in the form of a very abstract figure, you know, like a crystal or something. That can happen too, yeah. And usually for me, the form, sometimes we get stuck on the form, so, oh my God, it's a message. It's part of the message that they're telling us, you know. Yeah.
Over there.
Over there and then over there, yeah. You choose.
Thanks. So you were mentioning how, like, the pill that you take, you can take it with the attitude of this came out of the earth. How broadly can we apply that attitude to things?
How broadly can we apply it?
Yeah.
You know, into other.
So there's substances and chemicals that.
Yeah,
interact with
you know, I think not only every substance, but every one of our forms that we create as humans. You know, whenever I sit down in front of my computer, I connect with the spirit of the computer. You know, I forget that with my cell phone sometimes, but I do also with my cell phones, you know. And, you know, in preparation for this meeting, I connected with the spirit of the building, you know, and said, you know, please help, you know. So, you know, and certainly any substance that we create would be the same. Now, I take a lot of Chinese herbs and mushrooms and other, you know, and I do the same thing. I connect with the spirits of these things.
Do you mean any substances that humans create, like as medicine, not just, you know, in terms of industrial?
Yeah, you know, it's, I'm not sure I'm answering your question, so tell me, but any, you know, any substance we create of elements of the earth is no different from what the earth is doing. We are part of the earth, you know, we're an animal, so we're part of it. And so what we create there as a spiritual dimension is sacred, okay? Well, some of it may be toxic if we don't use it properly, okay? Once we connect, that's my experience and my hope for the future, with the sacred of something, you know, the way we use it is going to be in a sacred way, okay? I mean, there are plants that are living plants that are poisonous, okay? In other words, it's kind of the same thing, you know, no, I avoid poison oak because I'm very sensitive to it, but I work a lot with the spirit of the poison oak, and I honor it and whatnot, rather than squashing the plant whenever I see it, you know, or having a hostile relationship with it. And it makes a difference. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Just a follow-up from that. The two, also thank you so much for your presentation. The two substances I was thinking of that clearly don't have that attitude brought to them by most people are petrochemicals and uranium ore, you know, particularly, and they've both completely toxified the biosphere.
Yeah.
So the way that the uranium ore and petrochemicals are dug out of the earth and handled, the way they're used, and spread around. So
You're right, and again, my point is that if we saw the human species, the sacred in the uranium atoms and the sacred in the petrochemicals in the oil in the ground, we would not treat them and use them the way we do, or exploit them the way we do, you know. As you know, there are tribes in Central America for whom, you know, the oil on the ground represents, in their mind, you know, the blood of the earth and whatnot, and so you don't do anything to that. You leave it on the ground, you honor it, you do, you know. So, I think that's my point, you know. And so, you know, for me, uranium is not bad, and petroleum is not bad. Our intention, the way we use them, is what's bad. Okay, you see the difference there? And I think that by connecting with the sacred, you know, you change your attitude. I mean, if you see the sacred in a tree, in a hill, you're not going to, you know, mindlessly cut down a forest or raise a hill or whatnot, because it's sacred. You know, it has the same. You know, one thing that for me is important is I've always seen as maybe, you know, the major source of the human species' destructiveness toward the earth and each other is what I call anthropocentrism. You know, which is conscious and unconscious in so many of us, because it goes back in our culture a long time. In other words, that we are at the center, we have higher value than anything else around. And it's amazing how that is so much part of our culture. It is part of even a lot of the spiritual movements. It is even part of the environmental movement, okay? That rather than destroying the earth, it's going to steward, it's going to take care. But it's always from a higher value point of view. We know what to do, okay? You know, and as I said, there are, you know, we were talking about that, there are spiritual traditions these days, those introduced in the last 50 years or so, talking about a new consciousness arriving on the planet, with 2012, etc. When you ask, and I have done that with people, where is that consciousness, that new consciousness arising? It's always in the human species. You know, it's again anthropocentric. Maybe it's going to arise in other species. You know, it's you know, and it's a question for us to collaborate with these other species, to work with them. What's our role here? And so this anthropocentric feeling is so pervasive, and you know, it's a question to, you know, to realize once you see the sacred in everything, there is no higher value. You know, a piece of grass is as important for me. You know, I mean, I've learned not to squash a mosquito that's bothering me, because it has the same value as I do. That mosquito and me as a human being, we have the same value. And I think we need to get there, because they're secret, as I am. We're different, we're very different, okay?
It's a very living debate. We could spend
Yeah, we could
just
spend
on
that, yeah.
that.
Well, it's clear about the mosquito, but then there's Donald Trump. David, you get the last
Yes.
comment.
Yeah, this is also in the same vein as the human embeddedness and the role of the human. I'm curious about this real with a capital R, and you spoke about accessing it through science or through shamanism, and right now we have me and a couple people in this room happen to be reading Bruno Latour and Science in Action, and how this nature with a capital N is a result, or it's kind of stamped onto, on after the process of the creation of a fact, or how of the human participation in the creation of that fact. So I guess I'm just curious about what this real with a capital R means to you, and because it seems like when we talk about accessing it, we're taking the human, we're separating ourselves from it, right? And we're saying it's static, and we can access it. So I guess I'm just curious if you can speak to how, I guess, the participatory co-creation of the world, especially we have a lot of Whiteheadians in the room also, you know, and how you view that, and the role of science different than the role of shamanism in that? Because I can see, like, I've had personal non-ordinary states where I can kind of access that, and then I also study science where I can really see the relativity or the social implications of knowledge creation.
Mm.
So I guess, yeah, I'm just curious about the static nature of the capital R.
Yeah, let me answer it this way, because we're nearing the end, unfortunately, here. For me, the accessing of reality with a capital R happens only when there is no separation anymore. Okay? No separation between me and the world. In real science, no separation between science and spirituality. Okay, so there is really no separation between psychology and shamanism, for example. It all is one. And you know, and I have a chapter in my book on a shamanic practice that I was very fortunate to be taught by spirits and then to teach, which is the practice of shapeshifting. Now, this may blow your minds. Okay.
That's already happened.
But it's already happened.
Yeah.
To me, it's a deep spiritual practice, and it's one of that practice where, you know, in the shape-shifting, you actually become, it's a metamorphosis. You become, if you shape-shift it to an animal or to a tree or something, you become totally that animal. There is no longer, no, you are the other. It's a very, very unusual, even your consciousness becomes the consciousness of the animal or the tree. And the body starts to change itself. There is no separation, okay? And so when I'm in that state of absolutely no separation anymore, okay, you're one if you wish, and I live my daily life in that state, in ordinary reality. You know, that ordinary reality no longer has the same meaning. There is no more any separation. It's very difficult to explain that experience. And there's certainly some Tibetan Buddhist practices which get to the same high level of there being no longer any separation. It's very difficult to describe that level of non-separation, which is what big reality is, because our language is based on separation. The whole language and logic of it is based on separation, using separation of words. You know,
Yeah.
it's very difficult to.
I know we're out of time. I just wanted to maybe ask one very quick follow-up question, which is.
Oh, jeez.
I know. But if the, I guess my egoic self doesn't like the fact that, the human arising out of as a participant in this world, arising out of this world, I guess I'm just curious about the effect that human can have as participating in that one. right? Because it seems like it would be able to interact in a dynamic way with that one, even if we're able to escape into that one. But there is some kind of a separation, right? And I don't know. I guess I don't buy the fact that the distinctness and the separation and the differences really do play an important role in the co-creation and in changing the one, right?
Oh, yeah. No,
Would
we
you agree
live
with that, or?
in a dualistic world.
Maybe not even a dualistic world, in an infiniteistic world.
Yeah, oh, yeah, maybe, but
Yeah.
yeah, clearly there are, and that's, that's the big enigma and
Yeah.
mystery of life, of course. But the one who, for me, has best written about this, there are two, is Joseph Campbell and Meister Eckhart, who was a theologian talking about living the multitude of individual beings and the oneness at the same time,
Yeah, exactly.
which the mind cannot understand.
Yeah.
It's not logical, not possible, but that's, and I think most spiritual traditions try to get there.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's a sweet spot.
That's what I'm talking about. Thank you, Claude. Also, Claude brought some of his books. It's at a reduced price of, so if anybody's interested in his book, it's right up here. Please come on up.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, same, also, I never, considered
Because he's George. He's
well, yes.
got your back.
Capital R.
But then, that too, it's like,
Yeah, no, I was like.
Hi, Matt.